And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Natalya. I am a senior product marketing manager at Submittable. I am based at Submittable's headquarters in Missoula, Montana, joining you today from my home. Submittable is a social impact platform that corporations as well as foundations, nonprofits, and public sector teams use to launch, manage, and measure social impact programs such as grants, relief funding, scholarship awards, and other application-based programs. We've also are just in the process of launching our new corporate volunteering software. It's a very exciting time for us and a busy time, as I'm sure it is for all of you. So while I'm not like many of you out there running corporate purpose programs, from where I sit, I'm in a position to see how technology can empower and improve the types of programs that you are all running, making teams more agile, more resilient, and making your programs more impactful. And I really kind of have a front row seat to get to watch how so many of our clients are doing so much good by partnering in smart and creative ways with our software. And so for today's topic in particular on a fastest time to fund. So in these last few years, we've really kind of seen in a difficult way, I think, how a slow and clunky process really just doesn't meet the urgent needs of communities. And there's been a lot of learning in terms of how to speed up that time to fund. So I'm really excited today to share 6 different major capabilities and ways that you can use technology to drastically speed up that time to fund, getting dollars into the hands of those in need, whether that's individuals or a nonprofit or other community partners faster so that it can make a bigger impact. So I'll do a little introduction, kind of going over sort of how we got to this point. And then I'm going to go over 6 specific capabilities to look for. And when I go over each of these capabilities, you can see ease of use, agility, automated review, fraud screening, professional services, and funds distribution. I'm going to point out specific features that you should consider when evaluating a particular CSR technology, but also I'll share some kind of like tips or related items that might be a little bit less obvious of a component of a capability, but it's a good thing to have on your radar to kind of like know the scope of what is possible. And then I'll close with some resources and definitely interested in hearing your questions. If you do have a question throughout, go ahead and drop it into the chat, and Lacey is on notice to go ahead and interject if it would be a good good and on topic, and otherwise we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So diving in here, we all know this. There is unprecedented demand for urgency in the social impact space, and corporations and their corporate foundations are really feeling this need. I like to always include a GIF when I do presentations. It's felt a little bit like the world is on fire, right? With obviously the global health crisis that doesn't seem to end, climate disasters getting worse and worse, demands for social justice becoming louder and more urgent. There's a lot going on, and brands are feeling the pressure to respond through their CSR and corporate purpose programs. So it kind of used to be acceptable to kind of like act in your own time, right? And many brands have sort of been held hostage to the old way. But what used to be acceptable really isn't cutting it anymore. And I'm sure most of you as savvy professionals are well aware of this. Being slower to respond, running your programs on sort of your timeline, clunky processes, limited measurement, limited employee engagement, not scalable, not community centered. All of these things are just kind of not meeting the moment anymore. And so we're here to think about what if you could be ready for what's next, a speed for need response, a scalable programs that are measurable in terms of their impact, based in trust with community partners, and really focused on, engaging all of your stakeholders, consumers, employees, and communities. So here are some ways that technology can help you prepare for that new way. In terms of ease of use, this is really the key way to launch a new program fast, whether it's new because it's your first time entering this social impact space, or maybe it's new because you have a new initiative, or you're trying out a creative approach, or you're trying to respond to an emergency as it's unfolding, perhaps among your employees needing an employee relief program, or something happening in your community where you just really need to move quickly. Next is going to be agility. And agility is really, in terms of technology, it's how you're able to be responsive and adapt and iterate as you learn what's working and what's not working in your fast-paced program. So I like to think of ease of use and agility really kind of, like launching quickly, ease of use is key, but agility really works hand in hand with that capability, because you can really only feel confident in launching something new really quickly if you've also got that agility piece, knowing that you can make changes as you figure out, oh shoot, something I missed an important question. When I first launched this application, I need to go and change it. So having that flexibility can really give you a lot of confidence in moving quickly, knowing that you can iterate as you go. Next is automated review. So this is really cutting edge technology that may be newer for some of you. It's a way that you can outsource a lot of your due diligence in the review process to AI and machine learning, and really shave hours and hours off of your review process, which is super key, particularly as you run larger and larger programs, if you're dealing with thousands of applications that all need to have, for example, addresses verified. And we will also next talk about fraud screening. Fraud screening is, it's kind of unfortunate that we have to talk about, but it's also really, when you're running these quick and responsive programs, you're unfortunately particularly vulnerable to fraud. And when you're awarding to individual applicants particularly, there are some amazing integrations that can greatly mitigate fraud, your risk of fraud in those processes. Professional services is looking for, it's not the technology itself, but it's looking for the teams behind your technology company, your technology partner, who may be able to offer services that can really supplement your team's work in areas where you have gaps. So whether that be a robust implementation process, making sure that you are fully ready to go, or even, it gets as specific as creating a dedicated support team that's just for your program. That's maybe offering support in several languages for a really large program that's perhaps international. And last here we have funds distribution. So this is the capability to outsource the disbursement of the funds for your program. Be it you have that need because you're running a new program, perhaps, and you don't have an in-house system set up in order to disperse those funds into your community, or maybe you have a really painful process and it's going really slowly and you don't have electronic funds distribution set up. So in cases like that, it might be your best bet in terms of thinking of shortening your time to fund, to outsource that capability as well to your technology partner. So we will now dive in to each of those. So ease of use, launch your program fast. Urgency in giving really begins with launching a new program quickly. So when a new crisis is unfolding, you need to be able to respond. And so much of this comes down to the ease of use of your application platform, because you just, in these instances, you don't have time to be fighting with confusing software. So we'll go over a few key features to look for. These first ones at the top on the left, drag and drop form builder, that's just, it's kind of the industry standard in terms of looking for a really easy to use application builder. Form and project duplication seems kind of obvious, but it's, not every technology vendor is going to offer that. And that is going to just shave so much time off of your programs as you iterate and recreate them. If you can just duplicate it and have everything there, you're going to really be grateful for that. And you can, you can see with a year over year program, or maybe a quarter over quarter program, you can, create your duplicate in just seconds and you're ready to go. Look out for the need to code. So certain softwares offer some kind of more robust or advanced capabilities, but they're only available to clients who know how to code. Or maybe they're only available through like a support ticket request. So, you want to, in terms of like launching quickly, you're going to want to look for a self-service, like out of the box solution that you can get in there and get it going yourself, even if your team doesn't necessarily have technical expertise. A go live checkbox or something similar. That just means the ability to, like, when you're ready to go, you can go. You can, like, for Submittable, for example, and I know with some other products, it's just we call it a go live checkbox. Certain instances you're going to have to create your project in like a pre-production environment and like transfer it over to a production environment, and it gets like very convoluted and complicated, and that just, all of that kind of hassle slows you down when it comes to trying to launch a new program fast. So all of those are just kind of about reducing the technical barriers for you as an administrator when you're looking to launch a new program. But also consider the technical barriers for your reviewer experience, right? So how long is it going to take your review team evaluating the applications to get to know the software? You know, particularly maybe you're not working with an in-house review team. Maybe you're empowering community members through like a more participatory process to be a part of your review workflow. So how long does it take them to learn the software and make decisions? So one example would be a client of ours, Dell Technologies. We're running a process where they wanted to anonymize their review process, but before they had a good technology in place where it was really easy to do that, you know, they had to bend over backwards through all of these different like Google Sheets in order to try to anonymize data. And so then adapting a software that was easy to use for their review team, they're saving 30 minutes per review. So things like that, considering also the technical barriers to your review team, is a crucial piece of this, because, you know, it's every step along the process, right? How long it takes you to launch, how long it takes to review, and then of course, how long it's taking your applicants. So last year, I wanted to speak to the applicant experience, because of course, the less time, the less barrier, the less burden there is for your applicants to apply to your opportunity, also to communicate with you, also to provide the reporting that you're going to need later, the more streamlined the entire process is for everyone involved. So as another example here, we have a client called Mir. They're based in Seattle. They make premium stainless steel vessels for coffee and water and food. And using Submittable, they're actively supporting organizations working at the intersection of people and the environment. That's their corporate mission. And they do this through strategic trust-based grants to nonprofits, as well as event sponsorship, providing in-kind donations, and connecting with community leaders. So I'll quote Tiffany Ong here. She's the SVP of Impact and People over at Mir, and she says that as a generosity-driven company, we're constantly working hard to understand how accessible and equitable our grant-making program is in action. And they're using technology to further those goals by providing tools that remove as many barriers as possible for nonprofit organizations. And for them, that means collecting updates and streamlining their processes to be as intuitive as possible. So those are all of the kind of, you know, for reviewers, your applicants, and your team, why you want to be thinking about ease of use. Over here on the kind of to look out for, sometimes when you're purchasing software, it's hard to know whether or not it's going to be easy to use, right? Like, I know I've gone through this. I imagine many of you have gone through this too. You know, of course, in a sales discussion, they'll tell you it's easy to use, but until you sort of like get your hands dirty, it's hard to tell. So on the right here, these are just some tips for how you can sort of get at the real ease of use in a platform. Looking for video tutorials. If you can watch a video tutorial where you see how someone is actually building a form or creating a project or reviewing an application, you know, a video tutorial can't lie. If it's showing it live, right? I'm not talking about like, you know, an animated video where everything is embellished, but if you're just looking at sort of like a video tutorial available in a help center or like a videos page, that should be a good place for you to kind of get an idea of whether you actually agree with a software that might be presenting itself as easy to use. You can also look at software review sites. There's always an ease of use rating. A few that you can look for are Trust Radius, Capterra, G2. There's a whole lot. Anytime you Google a software, the review sites are going to definitely show up. Customer testimonials will often speak to the ease of use. So, you know, if you're reviewing customer stories, things like that, pardon me. And of course, See if the softwares you're evaluating are providing average time to launch data, right? And if they're not, that might be a question that you ask about if you get into a discussion with someone on their sales team. Because just as a general rule, a faster time to launch is a very good indication of an easy to use software. Okay, I'm going to move on to agility here. So traditionally, right, moving fast has not really been a priority across philanthropy, but we see that today it really is. And while it's improving things in many ways, it also poses some new challenges. So when you're moving quickly, for example, you might be skipping some steps, like, for example, getting approval from several internal parties before going live in favor of opening the opportunity sooner. You might also not have had time to think of every little detail, or maybe you forgot to include an important eligibility screening question that didn't come up until later. Or maybe you make a mistake in your form logic, right? Your conditional questions throughout your form. So the good news is, if you're choosing an agile software, these are really easily solvable problems. So you want to look for agile, again, no code software that you can edit at any time yourself. Self-service editing is key. You don't want to be waiting for someone on a support team to get back to you just in order to make a change to your form. And all of that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, what I really want to emphasize about why agility is important is because it just kind of takes the stress out of launching a new program quickly, right? Like you can have confidence knowing that if you made a mistake, which, you know, you probably did, we're all human, especially when we're moving quickly, we're really likely to make errors, but you can go and fix it. You can learn as you go, you can improve. And I think that that's really important in a space where you're trying to be really responsive to community needs as they're unfolding. So looking for agility, kind of like, what does it look like? What features do you look for in an agile software? Editable, right? Can you go in and edit your project after you launch it? Or do you need to request that someone else's, support team handles that for you? Are your changes going to go in effect immediately? Or is there some kind of like production launch time that you need to wait for? Look for contextual instructions. So this means like throughout your form, can you provide instructions about every form field? So for example, let's say that you're getting feedback that one of your questions is just confusing applicants and they're kind of not answering it correctly, or they're skipping it. So can you add instructions specific to that form field to kind of clarify the question, or maybe link to an FAQ, or, provide a link to like a video that really, like a quick little LIM video that explains what may be confusing people. Editable for applicants. This is so key to the applicant experience. If the applicant messes something up, or let's say their situation changes after the time that they submitted the application, can they send you an in-app message and say, I need to fix something on my form? At that point, you want to say, yes, let me open that for editing, no problem. Not, oh, sorry, no, you've got to withdraw your form and you have to do the whole thing over again. So editable for applicants is key. And as I mentioned there, again, in-app communication. In-app communication will be a key way that you can sort of work with your applicants, collaborate with them so that they can go ahead and edit it. It also saves a ton of time not going through your email every time that there's a question about your program. If you've got the contextual in-app communication just right next to your applications, it's going to save you a ton of time and you'll be very happy about it. I have look out for customer support here. Well, I'm gonna give you an example first, and then I'll move to that. So one example of why agility is so important. So our client Artist Trust. So this was kind of take yourself back to March of 2020, right? Not that any of us want to, really scary time. Performances were getting canceled, event cancellations, travel restrictions, layoffs and closures, all of this was kind of happening. And Artist Trust was one of the very first artist communities that moved quickly in order to provide emergency grant funds to artists. They launched on March 20th. It's pretty incredible. And they awarded between $500 and $5,000 on a rolling basis to impacted residents of Washington, working artists. And their goal was really to set up their grant as quickly as possible. And in order to enable that, they simplified their application as much as they possibly could. They wanted to spin everything up in 2 days. And a lot of the ways that they did that was just eliminating questions and only kind of asking the most essential details. But part of what made this successful was that they knew they needed the form or the process to be really flexible. And in fact, they kind of learned as they went. And one example I can share, our client said, you know, they learned so much from other funders about how they were running their program, and it helped them think about how they did theirs in terms of their review when they were kind of receiving too high of a load. And they adjusted their review process in order to move toward a lottery system instead of just a first come, first serve, in order to build a more equitable process. And that was a change that they were able to make sort of along the way, responding, you know, kind of in real time to the situation that they saw on the ground with their application. And really, I love how they just kind of adopted from the very outset a mindset of, okay, we're going to do this really quickly, but we know that we're going to have to be paying attention and responding to the situation on the ground in order to meet our goals, in this case around racial equity in their granting. And the other thing I have here, so if we look out for customer support. So here, you want to look for a technology company that's really going to partner with you. And I'll go over that again as we move into kind of professional services. But one way that this is relevant with the support team. So for example, with Submittable, our support team handles all of your applicants' technical support questions. And I know other vendors out there have the similar situation. So if there's a technical question that's coming up that maybe you don't know about, you don't hear about it, because it's going to the technology vendor support team, you want to like facilitate a relationship where there's two-way feedback. So for example, with the state of Montana launching their COVID relief program, they had 18 business relief programs. And I'll quote Angie Nelson, their senior budget analyst, and she just said that she really appreciated the feedback we received from support if they saw a particular portion of the application folks were having an issue with, and if they had a potential improvement that would maybe help applicants be more successful, they would let us know. So that feedback was appreciated. So that's an example of the kind of like relationship and just really partnership, kind of like shared ownership of wanting applicants to be successful that you want to look for, because sometimes the customer support team and not your team is really going to be in a better position to be getting on the ground feedback from those applicants. Alrighty, so moving on to automating review. So again, this is leveraging AI and machine learning to review applications or to review certain portions of applications. So smart technology has really revolutionized the review process, especially for programs receiving extremely large volumes of applications. Just to go over a few of the capabilities of this technology. So extracting and verifying data, automatically scanning documents such as tax forms or identification documents, correlating data. So that's validating data based on third-party databases, for example, online review sites or social media profiles, analyzing media. So that's extracting and validating information from, for example, images or video. Applying automated scoring, that could be, for example, performing calculations or applying scores based on custom defined rubric criteria that you're providing. And also natural language processing. So that's the ability to train an AI model to review narrative responses such as essay questions. And you can even train the model to review these narrative responses according to your rubric, trained by your own human review team. So the model, like you review a subset and you teach the model what you're looking for in those narrative responses, and you can monitor it as you go. It's really amazing technology. And it opens the door to including those essay-based questions when otherwise, especially in a fast-paced, emergency response program, you really wouldn't have time to include those kinds of questions. So pretty special. So one example of what automated review looks like in action, this is for a client that we had, the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. They were providing a rental assistance grant in Honolulu County, and they would have applicants upload a photo of their driver's license and their social security stub and card, and 2 pay stubs. And then the technology could then extract the data and put it into form fields for review teams. So that alone could save, hours per application. And then in the review workflow process, the technology could determine eligibility for the grants based on the 2 pay stubs to estimate the rough annual income. So that's saving additional hours per application, that a human doesn't need to be opening those files, reviewing that, making calculations. It's all done automatically by the technology. And I want to emphasize, like with this kind of a program, 100% accuracy or 100% like outsourcing is really not always the goal. The goal is to make running a really robust program with this a lot more manageable and a lot faster. So it's not, it doesn't necessarily remove the need for human involvement for every single applicant, but it can greatly reduce the pool where you're going to need a human to intervene and take a look at that in order to move that application to the next stage. And I do want to do a shout out to this particular client because they were recognized as a high performer in administering emergency rental assistance for COVID relief by the Department of Treasury. And then they were awarded as a result an additional $2.4 million to expand their program. So really proud of the role that we played in that, and that they were able to help so many people so effectively. And it's a good reminder that, this is why it's so important to get it right, because it really is helping people who are in need. A couple of things to look out for on an automated review technology: custom versus out-of-the-box automations. So there are a lot of out-of-the-box automations that come with a bunch of different social impact softwares, including Submittable has some. So an automated review process, however, is not going to be an out-of-the-box solution, because kind of by definition, it's customized for your program and what it is that you're looking for. So a whole lot of automations are good, automatically moving reviews to the next stage, automatic assignment, automatic labeling, like all of those things are great, important time savers. And, I could have given their own slide here, but they're typically, those kinds of automations are like always going to be included in your software that you're looking at. But this kind of automated review is really a custom solution that's designed for your program. And again, I want to emphasize, if you're running a smaller scale program, probably not worth the time it takes to customize that solution. This is really for when you're expecting thousands of applications, and all those hours that you're saving in the review process are going to add up and be really valuable. Alrighty, I want to move on to fraud screening. So as I mentioned earlier, it's unfortunate, but programs that are launched quickly, particularly when there's like a lot of dollars involved, like so many of the COVID programs that we have seen and continue to see as people are still trying to help out all these communities that were so devastated economically. They're unfortunately particularly vulnerable to fraud. There's a lot of publicity around them that kind of attracts bad actors. And when you're moving quickly, right, you might not necessarily be thinking about fraud on day one when you launch, right? Going back to kind of the launching quickly and the agility and things like that. So why does fraud matter? I mean, so obviously it's bad PR. COVID fraud is estimated at 250 billion with a B, which is really a shame. And all of the organizations, whether they are corporate or nonprofits or government, are kind of having to deal with that PR fallout after the fact, when it gets, when eventually we kind of get to the bottom of how much of the money went away in fraud. And when that happens, that's going to slow your program down and make it harder to scale for the next time. You're going to have to do a post-mortem and kind of figure out like, all right, how are we going to avoid this in the next time? Instead of like, if a program's really successful, like, great, let's expand it. Let's do it again. It's going to really make it harder to scale and slow down your larger social impact program kind of landscape. And then last, and of course, most importantly, if money's going to a bad actor, it's not going to the person who needs it, the communities who need it, who are going to be using it in the way that it was designed to, in order to improve lives, improve quality of life, improve communities, make them stronger and more resilient. So that's, of course, the most important reason that it's important to focus on fraud. The good news is technology has kind of done wonders toward this. And if you're interested, I can give you a little example of how some of these integrations work within a product. I do have a video teed up, but there's a couple of different integrations that, for example, submittable leverages. The first is with a vendor called authenticating.com. There are other vendors like Experian does this. There are other integrations you can look for. But that's integrating a knowledge-based authentication quiz, and you can embed that directly into your application form. So what's so great about these integrations is that you're introducing like really strong fraud prevention tools, but introducing almost no friction into the process. So a KBA quiz, this is something we've probably all taken before. Like, for example, if you're applying for a new credit card, it asks you questions based on your credit history or transaction history from both public and private data sources. And there's a time limit. So there's only 5 minutes to take the quiz, which means that it's really hard for someone who's trying to impersonate someone else to, get on Google and try to figure out all of these questions, what their high school, not a high school mascot, but like which zip codes have you ever been associated with? Like, I don't know about all of you, but I've been associated with a lot of zip codes, and someone trying to, like, to me, that'd be really easy to recognize all of my former zip codes. But to someone trying to impersonate me, that'd be, a lot of Google searches to figure out where all of those zip codes were associated with, try to figure out where I'd lived, et cetera, et cetera. Other ones include phone numbers or addresses or relatives. Those are the kinds of questions you see in a KBA quiz. Next is validating a government issued photo ID. So again, there are various vendors that provide fraud screening services like this. The one that Submittable uses is called Verif. And so Verif can validate a government issued photo ID from, I think it's 191 countries, all of the countries that aren't on the OFAC list. And that can include a passport, an ID card, a driver's license, or a residence permit. So just about anyone can get one of those kinds of IDs. And Verif is also a program that we use for real-time selfie matching. So first it validates the ID, and then it has the applicant take a selfie in real time, and it analyzes face, does biometric matching to determine whether or not the person who's applying is the same person who's represented in that photo ID. It's really cool, really high-tech stuff. And again, it only takes the applicant, a minute, and they are guided through on their smartphone. Okay, take a picture of your ID. Okay, now take a selfie. It guides them to adjust the lighting, all of these things. So it's really slick. And for you as an organization, it's all you're doing is adding a question to your form. And for applicants, it's really pretty frictionless. It's just another minute or so of their time. And it goes so far to reducing fraud. So a couple of examples, we've got a large union client and also the state of Minnesota, who are both running programs providing relief payments to COVID frontline workers. So how they're using fraud prevention is they're choosing to make both tools available and giving their applicants the choice of which identity verification tool they would like to use. And so for each of these programs, it was important to them to offer the choice, because it's important to recognize that there are, when it comes down to, excuse me, using these fraud prevention tools, not both tools are not going to work for every single person. So for example, in order to generate a KBA quiz, you're going to need a social security number, right? So that's only good for US-based applicants, and is also really only effective with someone who has some kind of credit history. So if you're working with a younger population, for example, that might not be a good fit. And then with the KBA quiz, with the ID matching and selfie matching, you're going to need some kind of camera, either from a smartphone or a webcam. So important to recognize that, at least with these tools, they don't necessarily fit for everyone. I've spoken to on the lookout for list over here, the clunky versus kind of like frictionless integration. So, make sure that the integration that is being described to you is easy to use and easy to integrate. And it's not kind of like introducing a whole, additional like hour into the process, either for your team or for your applicants. Definitely consider that applicant experience, because if you're deterring people from applying to your program because of the fraud screening, that's probably not going to be in alignment with your goals. And then lastly, and I think this is so important, is look for a program that gives you the flexibility to determine the workflow according to your organization's goals and risk tolerance. So in the examples that I was giving, perhaps you have some segment of applicants that are not going to have any credit history, and perhaps they don't have access to a smartphone. So they would kind of not be able to use these fraud screening tools. Look for a tool and a fraud screening process that's flexible enough that you can put those people into a different bucket and maybe give them a manual screening. So you're using your review team's resources for this small subset of people who need that extra time in order to go through the fraud screening. Maybe they need to complete an extra form with other information, or go through some other additional screening, or take a phone call with your review team, whatever it is. So, and if you have a really low risk tolerance, maybe you go through auto denies. And if you have a higher risk tolerance, maybe you let people through and have lots of different tiers for additional screening to follow up, or you're okay, you, according to your goals, you're okay with some level of money going out in kind of an unverified format. And that's a choice that you make in order to meet your goals. So with submittable, for example, you can use auto labeling to kind of identify what level, how many of the KBA quiz questions were correct, whether or not they passed the selfie matching ID verified. And then you can use that information however your team wants in order to meet your goals. So looking for that sort of flexibility there. All right, moving on now to professional services. So this is outsourcing, either program administration or different aspects of program setup to a professional services team so that you can do more with fewer resources. So we see this often with corporate clients who might not necessarily have an in-house team to run some of these programs, or maybe they're spinning up a brand new program. They're trying something new, some experiment, something creative, and they're going to take the time to staff it out later, but they want to get it going now. So this is a time that you can really lean on your technology partners team to kind of supplement your own team to get your programs going. So a few things to look for. Implementation, that's just the team that you work with to get up and running. Working, partnering really closely with an implementation team can really be all the difference in running a successful program. Again, particularly when we're in this kind of like emergency responsive space where you might be doing something you haven't done before. And you can kind of lean on the industry and like best practices expertise of implementation teams in order to help you be successful when you're trying something new. Next is full program administration. So this is when you don't have your program staffed out, you're trying something new. Like, so for example, at Submittable, we've got several big name social media companies, and they run investment programs in creators creating content on their platform. And they don't have dedicated in-house teams to kind of focus on that program and run that effort. So they're able to rely on Submittable's project management team to administer those programs. They communicate their goals. They kind of communicate the decision-making criteria, pardon me, and have the final say. But the Submittable team is kind of running the day-to-day administration of the program, while the client is still meeting their community investment objectives. So that's an example of when you would look for full program administration, project management. Next here is dedicated applicant support. So this is a kind of amazing thing that Submittable offers, and there may be others out there offering the same thing you can look out for. That's when, particularly for a robust program, when you can basically hire out members of the support team to focus exclusively on your program and kind of make them the experts, so that anytime an applicant is reaching out, they're going to come to the same person who's a full expert on your program, really working really closely with your team and provide, you can determine the support hours that you need, for perhaps it's an international program and you need additional support hours beyond what is traditionally offered. And you can also, work with, I have look out for language support here. So you can look for relying on translation services in terms of providing that support, depending on where your applicants are based or what languages they're speaking. Form and report building, that's kind of just additional help for your team. Maybe you don't want that full project administration, but you do want to rely on expertise to kind of build out those reports so that they're ready to go, or build out your, progress reporting or your initial application form, whatever it is. And I'm sorry, I don't have my note on considering context and I can't remember what I was getting at there. That's my apologies. So I want to give you a couple of examples of how you can see this in action. So Hope Chicago is one submittable client. They're revolutionizing access to higher education by providing free tuition assistance to at-risk students. They say with big dreams and a tiny team, they signed up on with Submittable just 1 month after creating this nonprofit. Hope Chicago was just working with Submittable's implementation team, not full program administration. But what I love about this example is that they were brand new, right? And I know a lot of like corporate impact programs are trying new things, trying to be creative. And I love how technology and partnering with, the expertise there can really empower someone who's brand new, trying something new, to really be successful. Working with our implementation team, we were able to accelerate the delivery on their product promise to the students, being true advisors and building the program and running it on a tight timeline. And it's very exciting. They were actually recently recognized by the governor of Illinois, as well as featured on 60 Minutes. So that was a very exciting one. Okay, moving on to funds distribution. So this is obviously like the key moment in the process, right? When we're discussing a faster time to fund, the actual disbursement of those dollars. And once more, this is outsourcing this kind of distribution to your technology partner is especially helpful if you're trying something new and you don't kind of have an established process for funds disbursement already. Or if you do, it is important to consider, like, how's it working? Who's running it? Is it your finance team? Sometimes the person, like the department who's handling the funds disbursement in a granting program, is removed, like they're on like the finance or the accounting team, and they're not really part of the program administration. So it's a good idea to check in and get some feedback on how that process is going, in order to see, if it's a pain point. And outsourcing this task in a lot of cases, certainly not for people who've got a buttoned up electronic distribution, but in many cases, it can be a lot faster way to get the dollars into the hands of grantees, but also free up a ton of time and stress internally, which, then you can use your resources in other ways to meet your, your business and your community investment goals. So things to look for: ACH transfer, that's electronic transfer. That's pretty much always going to be the fastest way to go about it. So if you're going to look at outsourcing this, you're going to want to make sure that ACH transfer is provided for everyone who is eligible and interested. I know that with the submittable partners, it can be as little as 48 hours or less in order to get those ACH transfers at the time that you click the Send Funds Now button. But then if you're looking over here, support for the unbanked, if you're running a program that is supporting an unbanked population, an ACH transfer ain't going to cut it, right? And so in those instances, you're going to want to look for a delivery of checks, or in some cases, prepaid debit cards, right? And that's, again, if you're looking to support an unbanked community, you need those additional options. And then when you're partnering with your vendor who's handling your funds distribution, they can handle that process much more swiftly than if you're running it in-house, particularly if you haven't done it before. So for example, Submittable, we've partnered with a bunch of clients on funds distribution, but we were able to distribute $235 million in COVID relief funding to eligible small businesses for a state government within 60 days from program launch. So that includes checks. So the ACH, again, it's going to be fastest. That's definitely preferred, but depending on your program, not all of your awardees might be good candidates for that. Alrighty, to close out here, I just wanted to share some resources. I referenced a lot of things today, that there are a lot more, there's a lot more that you can find. I'm on the marketing team, and we're constantly working hard to create resources to help people like you do your jobs better and smarter. We have a podcast called Impact Audio that just wrapped up season 2. That's a great way to kind of catch up on industry, trends and best practices and things kind of as they're happening. Like guests for season 2 included Chris Jarvis of Realized Worth, Allie Murphy of Engage for Good, people who are sort of the beating heart of this space. So I definitely recommend you check out Impact Audio. Sam Kaplan is our VP of Social Impact, and he writes a twice monthly newsletter that, again, is really dialing in on, he just has his finger on the pulse of kind of the corporate purpose space. So I really recommend subscribing to his content as well. We've got a guide on measuring social impact. We like to call it the coffee table book, actually, and so many more resources on our website. So I certainly invite you all to check those out. And I'm ready if there are any questions.
Yes, we do have one. The question came in around how do you support international grantees?
Sure. So in terms of what you want to look for in technology, there are a few different places where this came out. You want to look for localization, which isn't something I touched on today. So at Submittable, and I'm sure at several of our competitors, if you add localization to your account, all of the static text will translate automatically, and it will adopt the text from your browser. So there's like the language from your browser. So it really happens just with a click of a button when we turn localization on, at least for Submittable. So if my browser language was set to French, then the URL would detect that and deliver all static text in French. And then, we see clients often kind of provide, especially with English and Spanish, side-by-side language, kind of like you see in a museum often. It just has both texts right there, and everybody kind of knows, okay, I'll read the one that I can read. That's one way we see it supported. We see other clients issue different forms in different languages as necessary. If there's like 3 languages or more, that's another way it's supported. When it comes to applicant support, I know I touched on that a little bit. Like at Submittable, for example, we can use a language translation service. We also do have in-house Spanish support. So that's the kind of thing you can look for. Like, are they going to be able to help out your applicants in a different language? And then, I think I skipped over this by accident when it came to funds distribution. Let me see. Not that one. Here we go. Support for international currencies. So at Submittable, we work with 2 vendors primarily for funds distribution. One of them is Payoneer, and Payoneer can handle international currencies. And really, the way that they do it is very cool because it lets the applicant choose what kind of currency they want to receive their funds in. I will say, when you are distributing funds internationally, if you were to do it with us, you'd work with our project management and implementation teams, because there are sort of a whole host of questions like, who do you want to be paying for the, transaction fees? Like, do you want to absorb that as your own organization, or do you want to pass it along to your grantees? Like, what universe of like, do you want to let your applicants choose which currency they're going to receive at the time of payment, or is that something that you would want to determine ahead of time, kind of before it gets to that step in the process? And then maybe you have a set fee, like that's the way one of our clients is handling international fees. They're adding an extra $50 US on top to make sure that they're absorbing that cost. So when it comes to the actual like delivery of funds, whole lot of complicated things to consider, but there are definitely at Submittable, and I'm sure others, ways that vendors can support that delivery. Trying to think if there's anything else specific about international programs that I didn't cover. Feel free to follow up, but hopefully that gives you a little bit to think on.
Terrific, thank you. So another question came in around what suggestions you might have for sourcing accessible systems in terms of disability access or universal design.
Great question. So you're going to want to look for a VPAT. And I can't remember off the top of my head what VPAT stands for. Maybe I'll figure it out over here. But the key thing with a VPAT is that you're going to want to look for the results of the VPAT. So, okay, it's a voluntary, got it here, voluntary product accessibility template. And what it is a template following industry standards from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0, which are maintained by the World Wide Web Consortium. It's basically like an assessment. So the fact that you have a VPAT, like I might have a score on a test that I took, but like, what's my score? Right? You want to know what the results of the VPAT are. So for example, at Submittable, we have a VPAT that affirms that all of our applicant facing technology is accessible to submitters with a wide range of disabilities. And, you know, as you get further along in the process, if you're not quite sure, you know, I've done some competitor research. Not everyone displays or makes easily available the results of their VPAT. So if accessibility is a big concern for you, I would really recommend you look for the results of that VPAT. And that's the highest standard that I'm aware of in terms of looking for that.
Thank you. Another question that came in was if you can share any examples or ideas around reducing the burden on applicants, or if you've seen any systems where applicants can copy over portions of a common grant application.
Great question. Gosh, my team has tons and tons of resources that we've created on that topic on accessibility. So I would encourage you to go to blog.submittable.com and look for some stuff there. I'm kind of, oh shoot, I lost the chat here. There was something I wanted to share on accessibility. Key things are ease of use, being able to save your draft and come back later, things like that, editability, in-app communication, things like that I spoke on. I'm so sorry, what was the second part of your question?
If you've seen any systems where applicants can copy over portions of a common application.
I'm thrilled to hear that question. So the MacArthur Foundation has, I'm sharing an accessibility guide right there, by the way, in the chat. So do check that out if you're interested in accessible forms. So the MacArthur Foundation has gathered together a bunch of key stakeholders, and I'm going to pull up an email right here so I can remember exactly what they're calling it. Because they are calling it the Philanthropy Data Commons, and they are working on a pilot program for what in the industry has kind of historically been known as a common grant application, and Submittable is a participant in this pilot Philanthropy Data Commons. I know that many other vendors are, excuse me, but I would Google that. There we have an interview with John Moore from the MacArthur Foundation on a season 1 of Impact Audio. Definitely dig into that and follow that effort.
Terrific, thank you. Another question that came in was if you could share any an overview of maybe some ethical challenges that might come up in the like grant process and how to address those.
So is this around like bias or equity, maybe in like the review process, that kind of thing?
Let's start with that. And Renee, who asked the question, if you have any more details to share in your question. Oh, yes, she's saying yes.
Yes, okay, great. Yeah, so Submittable, and I know many of our other vendors out there offer what we call a concealed option in the review process, where you can choose to conceal certain pieces of information in an applicant, for example, a demographic survey. You might also want to collect like images of applicants, but conceal those, things like that. It's sort of like a two-pronged approach. So the first prong is concealing certain information from applicants. There's 3 prongs. I'll share 3 prongs. Number 2 would be confidentiality for reviewers, so that they're not getting influenced by each other as they go through reviewing an applicant. And then lastly, you want to make sure there's an administrator checking in on, flagging if certain reviewers are consistently rating like higher or lower, for example, than others, or if there might be an opportunity for retraining if you are identifying some bias among a certain reviewer. And then other things to keep in mind about this, some programs are specifically designed to address historical inequities, and they're designed to be investments in certain communities of, communities of color or queer populations, right? So in those cases, you don't actually want to conceal that information. Like, that's a key part of your strategic investment in those communities. So considering your goals, I've done a whole webinar about best practices around collecting demographic data. That's an important thing to be mindful of. You could find that at submittable.com/webinars. I think it's just called Best Practices for Collecting Demographic Data. So lots to consider there, being thoughtful about the language that you're using so that people feel included. Hopefully those are some helpful suggestions. That's, again, a topic we have a lot of resources on submittable.com/resources. So I think we have a whole bias and equity section.
Well, Natalya, thank you so much for walking us through all this, the resources that you shared, and just tips to think through, what do you want to look for, and how do you make your process more seamless. So we really appreciate you being here with us today. We hope everyone enjoyed this session. We do very much appreciate your feedback on each of the opportunities that we are providing through the CSR Marketplace Live. So Sarah has dropped into the chat a link to a brief survey. It should only take a few minutes, but it will really help us as we evaluate and further develop our programs. So thank you all for joining us. We will be sharing a recording of this session. If there's anything you want to go back and watch, or you weren't able to join us live, you'll have access to all of this information as well. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much, Lacey. Thanks for joining, everybody.